Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Volunteering. I'm your host, Stormy Bell. Today, I have a new friend, Erin LaBarge. She's a global leader with SAP. I just want to welcome her to our conversation. She's out on the West Coast, so it's a little early for her, but I thank her for being so gracious to spend this time with us. Welcome, Erin.
Oh, hi, Stormy. Thank you so much for having me.
Been looking forward to this. You've had a lot of things in your life since we first talked about you coming on. So I'm just so glad we finally found a time that worked.
Me too. Me too. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. I just want to share a little bit about Erin. She joined SAP in 2006, and she's held many roles, starting with human resources and global marketing. Then she moved into a full-time role at SAP's CSR, and that's Corporate Social Responsibility Team, to lead strategic programming and volunteer initiatives for the United States in 2015. Within a few years, that evolved into a role driving strategic volunteer programming for the wider North America region. In April of 21, she took on the global role leading SAP CSR's global volunteer and employee engagement strategy, working with focus and empathy to help more employees play a role in the creation of positive social impact and enable them to build culture, skills, and a deeper capacity for inclusion leadership at the very same time. I love that. You do so much. That's
Well, thank you. Thank you. I work with absolutely amazing people, and we're a small but mighty team, as we often say.
that's awesome. How many people are on your team?
There are 17, including our fearless leader.
Oh, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
you say you're globally. So where does that include? Like, what is that?
Oh my goodness. So let's see. We have folks on every continent except for Antarctica. The majority of our team is based out of SAP's headquarters in Waldorf, Germany, but I have colleagues in Dubai, in Johannesburg, scattered across the United States, a, a couple of other places in Europe, including Cannes, France, which I keep waiting for an invitation to come to the film festival, but that one hasn't arrived in the mail yet. And it's just the people I work with. I tell you, on the hard, stressful days, they are what kind of keep me focused and keep me in this work. Absolutely.
Awesome. All
Yeah.
right. Some of my listeners have seen the SAP advertisement like at the sporting games, but they might
hmm
not actually know who you are, what you do. Can you just share a little bit about that before we go any further in the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you definitively that we have nothing to do with the button on the television remote control
Oh,
that says SAP. We used to get that question a lot when we would invite students to come into our offices for different volunteer workshops. So SAP has been a leader in the enterprise application software space, or ERP. And as I have understood it in my 17 years of working here, and the company has certainly evolved in its offerings significantly in that number of years. But essentially, the software that we create and partner with our customers on is really about helping them do what they do better, faster, more efficiently. It helps systems communicate with one another. And our overarching goal as a company is to sort of use that software and use the relationships that we have with these incredible companies across the world, all of our customers, to create this kind of immersed, connected network of what we often refer to as intelligent and sustainable enterprises. So it's essentially, again, all about our software helping companies do what they do best with more efficiency.
okay. So why does SAP value corporate social responsibility?
Oh my goodness. I don't know how much time we have, but you may have to cut me off at some point,
Okay.
Stormy.
Reader's Digest version.
Reader's Digest, what's that little TLDR, too long, didn't read? We don't want to put any of those disclaimers on the podcast description today. Really for us, I think that we recognize that as a global leader, one of the biggest companies in the world, we certainly do have a responsibility. It's right there in the name of our team, right? Corporate social responsibility. We do have a responsibility to share and leverage the resources that we have at our disposal. And I think the other piece of it, beyond being able to offer grant funding to organizations around the world, is our goal has always been to really build deep holistic partnerships with nonprofits and the partners that we work with. We very much have avoided from the beginning this notion of being, sort of a checkbook philanthropist is an expression I heard a while back. For us, it's really about taking the best of what we have to offer, and that includes our amazing employee base, which is why we engage them as volunteers and pro bono consultants, and making sure that we're investing in places that align with who we are and what we're best served to offer as SAP, as a technology company. But I think too, for us, we recognize that giving employees the opportunity to engage in their communities or virtually, we offer plenty of virtual volunteer opportunities, is actually a really amazing way for us as a company to invest in them. Because it's not just about, as we often say, kind of doing good simply for the sake of doing good because it's our social responsibility. We actually draw some significant value as a company from being able to engage our employees in this way. It's amazing for things like retention, skill development, leadership development for our employees, and it helps them feel more connected to one another. And certainly, kind of still coming out of COVID and with some of these return to work policies, we think it's ever more important for employees to have ways to really come together. And it's right there in my bio. I say that proudly, is that our programs really help to contribute to driving the kind of culture that we want to see at SAP and building the kind of leaders that not only do we need inside our company, but quite frankly, I think the world that we live in today needs leaders that understand sustainable business, they understand community engagement, they understand the nonprofit sector, the public sector. So for us, there's just such a myriad of benefits. Again, I could go on and on, but I
Uh,
will I will stop myself there.
okay. So do you see like what's your engagement level from your employees? I mean, globally, you must have, I should have checked that number. Like how many employees worldwide? How many, let's like what's the percentage? Half? Three quarters? How many get involved?
Yeah, so SAP has more than 100,000 employees operating around the world. I think right now we're somewhere around 105,000, if I'm not mistaken. And one of my favorite stats, just to sort of pat ourselves on the back as a company, is I love the fact that 105,000 employees is spread out across, I think it's more than 150 different countries, which is amazing to me. And right now, they're basically on an average year, about 20,000 of our employees take part in various volunteering or pro bono consulting programs that are on offer from SAP.
Oh, that's amazing. Let me
Yeah.
kind of pivot that slightly. Um, when people, young people coming out of college or looking to make career changes and they look at SAP, is your CSR team initiatives something they look at as to a culture they want to work at? Like, is that something people look at?
I I think so. I mean, that's certainly what, when you read the reports and the surveys that are put out by companies like Ernst and Young. I mean, there's definitely a deep and I think very authentic desire, especially for Gen Z and millennials, to work for companies that make a positive social impact, that contribute to making the world around them better, whether that's from a CSR perspective or the work that they're doing across their supply chains, topics like social procurement, making sure we're buying responsibly, and partnering with other responsible organizations. I absolutely think that that's something that, um, you know, young people, but also, I mean, I'm right in the middle of, like, I've heard that I think I'm technically Gen X, but I'm on the low end of Gen X, so I sometimes identify as a millennial. And I think that even sort of older generations, so to say, while they may not have been putting a lot of value on that when they first entered the workforce 20 some years ago, I do think that, as people are looking for different roles and really trying to invest in the company where they work, an organization having CSR programming and again, really going that extra mile to contribute in a positive way socially, I think, and environmentally as well, I do think has a lot of value for people.
Love it. Now we have couple mutual friends who volunteer with my day job, Chester County
Mm.
Futures.
Mhm.
One of which is Mike Sierri, and him and I have spoken about that he had taken a social sabbatical. He
Mm, mhm.
actually helped us develop a program, and SAP graciously hosts it every year in August for our students who have graduated high school and are going to college, trade tech. Um, can you just explain, like, what a social sabbatical is, and do you have other programs like that, and what would that look like?
Oh, absolutely. So, social sabbatical has evolved into a portfolio of programs, but the global social sabbatical, or SOSA, we like acronyms and we like to create long names for things at SAP. I think mostly it just is an excuse to come up with an acronym or a short version. So we often refer to the social sabbatical as the SOSA. It just rolls off the tongue a little easier.
Okay.
But the global SOSA is a program that is available to what are known as catalysts at SAP. So that's essentially the top tier of performers that have been identified inside the organization, and they're invited to apply to the social sabbatical. It's a program that we have built. It's over 10 years old. We have built it in partnership with an incredible organization called Pixera Global. And the short version of what it allows us to do is send some of these big brains, these high performers at SAP, and send them overseas. We have this program, it runs in a variety of countries across the world, and those change and kind of ebb and flow each year. And they're able to go work side by side with a nonprofit or social enterprise. And essentially, they've identified a problem that this social organization or this impact business is experiencing that's getting in the way of their scalability or their growth. And what this program does is allow that organization to then embed these SAP employees into their staff for about 4 to 5 weeks. And they work in a focused way together to solve this strategic challenge that they're experiencing. And so those SAP pro bono consultants provide a solution at the end of that 4 weeks to this organization that they're then able to put into action inside the walls of their company or their nonprofit, and continue to push their growth forward. So it's an incredible opportunity for organizations to sort of leverage skills and strengths that we may have inside of SAP that they may be looking for on their staff, but also the employees that are going out on these experiences are coming back. I mean, I would not be exaggerating when I tell you, because we hear this all the time. We've got survey data around it as well. They come back changed.
Yeah.
Absolutely have new perspectives. They're able to grow as individuals personally and grow in their careers. And because that program has been so successful, we've grown. And one of the other programs that we offer in that portfolio is called the local social sabbatical. And so instead of sending employees from that group of catalysts, our top tier leaders, across often oceans and borders, what we're able to do is partner with organizations on the ground in the communities where SAP operates. And so we've run that program in a couple of countries around the world, including here in the United States. And it's a very similar concept. It's just instead of an employee stepping away fully from their role to go work side by side with an organization, they have to sort of balance that work part-time, but they're still able to make a very, very deep impact and still get all of that two-way learning is still happening, even though, it's sort of a part-time situation more than it is full-time. And as an extension of that, because we have found such an interest from employees in doing more pro bono, we wanted to make more opportunities like this available. In the last couple of years, we actually have launched a virtual pro bono program. And this is something that we refer to it as the Acceleration Collective. And it's built in partnership with an organization called Moving Worlds. And so it's the same concept, leveraging, the best of what we have to offer at SAP, the talents and the skills and the experiences of our employees, and they get partnered with social entrepreneurs in a virtual setting to do the very same thing, to solve strategic challenges that these organizations are experiencing together and leave them stronger and more prepared to grow and to scale at the end of all of it. So it's actually it's a great question to have asked. And I will get down off my soapbox now, but we've really been working hard over the last couple of years to scale and make pro bono available to more employees, because we really do think it is some of the best experiential learning that we have to offer our employee base.
I'm going to swing from there and ask you, from the social sabbaticals or other pro bono work, can you share a story of impact, something that you've witnessed firsthand, or an employee has come back and shared, like truly seeing what they're doing impact individuals, organizations, communities, like what that would look like?
Oh gosh, I don't know where to choose from. There's so many incredible stories from our employee base. Let's see.
If you can give me Reader's Digest versions, you can do too.
I absolutely can. Yeah. Um, I have to say that this is a story that I heard through somebody else. So this is not a personal connection that I have with this individual. So the details are a little bit sort of soft around the edges, but I remember having a conversation with a dear friend of mine at the company, and she was mentoring a young man on her that was relatively new to her team, and he wasn't quite ready for sort of the next jump in his career, but he wanted to start to do a little bit more. He wanted to have practice around things like project development and working more collaboratively as part of a team. He knew those were areas that he wanted to grow in. And she had caught wind and knew about our pro bono programs here at SAP. And she actually, as his mentor, recommended to him that he take a look at the programs that were on offer. This young man was based in Latin America. And she encouraged him to take a look at some of the programs that we have there because she knew that these programs would offer him an opportunity to kind of flex and grow those skills. And he participated in a program called our Socio Inno Labs, excuse me. And coming out of that program, he grew so much as an individual. He felt more confident. He felt he had all these new perspectives and experiences. And he actually felt, he shared with her that because of this, his participation in this program, he felt confident enough to apply for a role that he probably wouldn't have considered himself eligible for. And I'm fairly certain he got that job, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that for sure, but for the sake of the story, let's assume he did. And so I think that's just a really, that's one of a handful of stories like that. But I think beyond that sort of handful of folks who are actually looking at applying for sort of next tier jobs in the company, there are so many stories that we hear from participants who come back and they've really sort of they feel like their minds have opened. They've got these new perspectives and they don't necessarily have to do our classic SOSA program where they travel to another country. Simply just working with an organization across an ocean or across a border has really enabled them to listen better, I think, communicate better, more inclusively. And I mean, those are skills that every leader in an organization should possess.
Totally agree. Well, would love to pivot again. Do you have a volunteer journey?
Absolutely. I don't know if I would be in this work if I didn't. Um, do you want me to kind of go back to as close to the beginning as I can muster?
Wherever you want to begin, just tell me
Yeah.
about your journey. What does it look like? Why is it a passion? I mean, I
Mm.
know when we were getting ready for our conversation today, you had written down, this may sound odd, but one of the main reasons that I volunteer is to make my brain uncomfortable. Let's start
Yeah.
there. Explore
Let's
from
start
that.
there. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll say this. One of the first volunteer experiences that I had was in high school. And in order to sort of graduate from sophomore year of high school, you had to contribute a certain number of service hours, as they were referred to. And I selected an organization in my community called the Inspiration Cafe. And essentially, what it entailed was my mother, often much to her chagrin, getting up very early in the morning on Saturdays and driving me to the Inspiration Cafe, where myself and a couple of other classmates of mine essentially prepared and served breakfast for in this cafe, which was available to people who were unhoused, right, suffering from homelessness. And it was one of the first times, beyond sort of the efforts that my parents would make growing up to make sure that we were going through the things in our kitchen cabinets and donating those to soup kitchens and picking toys and making sure that we were donating them to local shelters and things like that. This was the first time that I was having a volunteer experience by myself without my parents there. And, I remember, to me, I was young, but I never felt necessarily uncomfortable in that space. But what I remember being surprised by is I would just talk to the individuals that were coming in for services at the cafe, just like I would talk to anybody in my life. And I've always been a very kind of chatty, gregarious person, for better or for worse. And I remember this gentleman, and I wish I could remember his name. He I'd gotten to know him a little bit, and he sort of stopped me one day when we were talking, and he said, he said, young lady, he was older, certainly. He said, young lady, I want you to know that we get a lot of people that come in here and serve us food and volunteer. And for somebody so young, for you to be so comfortable looking me in the eye and talking to me as though there's no difference in our stories is something really special. And it's something that, makes me feel good and he was saying that about himself. And he said, oftentimes people will avoid eye contact because they don't really know what to say. And they feel like there's this sort of divide between us across the table. And I, I took that as just not only the biggest compliment, but it really, I don't know, I guess it shifted my perspective that, you can choose how you show up in any situation. And I think volunteer experiences can be uncomfortable. And the reason I mentioned that, I sort of they can confuse our brains and make our brains uncomfortable is I actually think whether I knew it or not in that moment as a teenager, I was kind of leaning into the place where I may have felt a little bit uncomfortable because I didn't know these people. I didn't think we had anything in common. And the talkative part of me just sort of shoved past all of that in service of just wanting to have a conversation and get to know him and sort of have a good time, quite frankly. And so I think that was a changing point for me. I realized the power that we have to show up in our community, show up in situations, and see past what may feel a little bit sticky or a little bit confusing or a little bit uncomfortable. And in service of just making sure that the people in that space with us feel good and feel like they belong and feel safe in your presence and comfortable in your presence. And that has really been, I think that part of my personality just like shot to the forefront that day. And it's something that it's an experience I hold very dear. And it's a quality that I will say we're not often good at tooting our own horns and patting ourselves on the back, but I will say it is a quality that I'm quite proud of. And I like to think that that conversation with that gentleman, you know, made made it okay to feel proud of that all
Yeah.
those years ago.
And it became a core memory as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to sort of keep kind of leaning into what I was saying about volunteering making our brains uncomfortable. We are in uncomfortable and unknown situations often. And when I think about our groups of employees going out to volunteer, they may be driving and parking their car in a neighborhood that they've never been to before, right? They may be interacting with people who they at first sort of glance don't feel like they have anything in common with. But I have learned in all the years I've been doing this work and learned from conversations with experts in this space that from a behavioral science perspective, it's those moments of uncomfortability. They're referred to as disorienting dilemmas. And that is actually the moment that our brain opens itself up to learning and to changing our perspectives and starting to actually build those new neural pathways that can break down some of the bias that we have and actually help us evolve and help our brains evolve for the better. So that's why I like to say that I think one of the best things about volunteering is it does make us a little bit uncomfortable. And if we as a CSR team and our volunteer leaders can help employees kind of move through that discomfort the way that I was able to do in partnership with that wonderful gentleman all those years ago at the Inspiration Cafe, that's what will keep us coming back and keep us continuing to, give of ourselves and give our time to these organizations that, are often so under resourced. And that's where we can start to build those bridges in the community. So I just think that's quite cool that what makes us a little uncomfy is actually really good for us in the context of volunteering.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, we're coming along to my favorite question. Can you share a blooper and what you learned from it? It can be in
Mm.
any of the situations, any of the experiences that you've heard of or experienced firsthand. And a blooper is not something necessarily that went wrong. It
Uh-huh.
just didn't go as planned. And what did you learn from it?
A blooper. That is such a good question, Stormy. I mean, I've had my fair share of bloopers, blunders, mix-ups. I like to joke often that there's a little gatekeeper between my brain and my mouth, and sometimes that gatekeeper falls asleep. And I tend to talk fast too. So, if anything, I think most of the bloopers and blunders in my life come from I just say a little too much or put my foot in my mouth. I don't know if this is a blooper or a blunder, but there was an experience years ago where I was helping to coordinate a volunteer activity in our New York office. And it was a workshop for students where we were bringing them in. I think we were maybe working on resumes and interview prep. mock interviews, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And there was somebody who was supposed to do, deliver a presentation to the students, and they got caught up in something at work, and they felt terrible about it, and they had to step away, and they weren't able to join on the day of, and it was literally a day of change and pivot that we had to make, and there wasn't anybody else that I could find on short notice, and was not an expert in the content that was being delivered, and I thought, okay, girl, you nobody else is going to do this if you don't do it, so you need to step up and be prepared to probably not get everything right, but these students deserve your attention. These students deserve to have the content delivered to them as best as you can, as it was promised. And so it was probably one of the worst presentations of my entire career. But I remember thinking, if I can't laugh at myself while I do this and joke with the students in the audience about the fact that I'm not super prepared, but here we go. I'm going to share with you what I've heard, and we're going to make the best of it. Um, they were probably laughing at me the whole time, but I like to think that me kind of making fun of myself a little bit lightened it, and, hopefully, I don't know. I always fear the judgment of teenagers because teenagers are scary, but I like to think in that moment, flubbing my way through that presentation maybe taught them something, that it's okay to not get it all right. But I don't know if that counts as a blooper or a
Oh,
blunder,
no,
but it
but I love
certainly was
that. I think
it
that's
was
a
a
great
circus up there, I'll
blooper.
tell you that much. I had notes everywhere. I was dropping pages on the floor. She was not at her best that day, but we got through it.
Amazing. Okay, we are at the end of our conversation.
It went by so fast.
I know. I'm gonna invite you to love, capital letters, LOVE, love
Mm,
on SAP, your employees, like any piece of it that maybe we didn't cover, you wanted to make sure
mm.
you wanted to share, just love on them.
Oh my goodness. The one thing I think that pops to mind when I think about the people in this organization that I have the absolute utmost respect and gratitude for, it's our community of volunteer leaders. They go by different names around the world. In some places, they're called volunteer ambassadors. Others, they're referred to as CSR leaders, or some of them are members of volunteer councils. We've got this sort of beautiful dynamic model of engaging them. But these are employees that do not work for the CSR team. They have full time other roles at SAP where they're out there kicking butt for the company in other ways. And they find and make time to lead volunteer activities for their fellow employees and their teams on the ground in the SAP office or community where they live. And I will tell you, these are the unsung heroes. They are some of the strongest leaders that we have at SAP. They do all of this because they are truly intrinsically motivated to do it. For them, it's not just about helping, right? It's not just about contributing. They see the power of engagement. They know, what they have to learn from these experiences, and how they can help other employees kind of come into those opportunities to learn and spend time together, and again build culture. And I am in awe of them and what they do every single day, and our programs would 100% not have the impact that they have if it weren't for that community of leaders. It's just we wouldn't be able to do what we do as such a small team without them. And they impress me, and they blow me away every single day. So thank you to anybody out there who may be listening who is a volunteer ambassador or champion or CSR leader at SAP. You're my heroes.
Amazing. All right, Erin, I just want to thank you for being my guest today. I've totally enjoyed this conversation. I learned so much. I already admired you as a company and organization. Now I'm like, wow, I mean, get shot in SAP from the rafters. This is pretty cool. Uh, so I just want to thank you. To my audience, I want to thank you for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please rank and rate and review it wherever you're listening. It really helps other people hear about these great stories of impact from around the world. So, thank you for listening to The Art of Volunteering. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye bye.